of here, Sensei!
Hi, welcome back for another 7 Caillou challenge called Print, Count, and Numbers. This one was a little weird for me to read at first. I didn't quite understand what they were looking for, so make sure you take the time to read the description and understand it. I'll try to explain briefly, so hopefully you don't struggle like I did to initially understand. They're going to give you this string of data as input. It's supposed to be numbers, but notice at the end they tell you to watch for some edge cases here, some invalid or improperly formatted input, such as empty, nil, or non-numeric strings. So if you get letters or punctuation marks in there, just return the empty string is what we're told. But anyway, assuming you are provided numbers, you're going to take each character in turn, processing from left to right, and you're sort of counting how many times it occurs consecutively. So notice we start from the left, we have a 1, the next character is a 1, and then it changes to a 2. But notice that it remained 1 for the first 2 characters, so they're saying, hey, take how many times it happened, which was 2, and then the value, the digit that corresponds to, so that it starts with 2, 1 in the output. You'll notice the first 2 characters of the output there. And then do the same thing. The next number is a 2, but there's only one of them. So then you get 1, 2. You move on to the next digit since it's different. And you see finally it's 1, 3. You append all of that together to get the 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. And then they give you a second example here just to make sure you understood. This is the one that cleared it up for me. You can see 2. There's a 1, 2, right? Before it switches to 1s. And then you get 2 1s. And then you get 1, 2, and 1, 1, and 1, 3. And hopefully by now that's clear to you why it should return that. Anyway, go ahead and pause the video, have a go at this. Come on back when you're ready. Okay, so I assume you made an honest effort. Hopefully you had some luck, but either way, let's go through a solution. I like to take care of these edge cases sort of right away at the top to make sure we're not encountering errors or wasting any time processing input that can't fully be processed. So let's go ahead and handle that first. We know the string class has this handy is null or empty method, and we'll pass data to it. And in that case, we'll simply say return the empty string, just like we were directed to in the last sentence here. We can do the same thing with checking for non-numeric strings, as they'll call it. Remember, they can give us all valid integers in the input, but if there's even a single letter or some other kind of character in there, it's considered invalid, and you just return empty string for the whole thing. So a way you can do that would be to say if data.any, we're going to use this link method, right? It just checks if any of the elements in the collection, in this case a bunch of characters that the string is comprised of, if any of those fulfill some condition. Like I said, even one non-numeric character invalidates the whole input. So that's why I'm just using any. I don't have to count anymore. I just need to know if there's one or more. So I will say I like to use ch for my variable name for characters, but you can use whatever name you want here to describe a character. Maybe you would say, yeah, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I always use ch. And then finally, I'm going to check. You know, the char class, especially if you've been with me at all, has this is number. And notice I negated it with this exclamation mark. So it's just saying not, right? So read this like English, not is a number. You know, we don't kind of say it quite that way, but it's programming. It's not English, right? I'm sorry, not data. It's our variable name. The character in question, right? It's going to pull each character one in turn and examine each of them. If any one of them is not a number, bam, we're done. Same difference. We're going to say return empty string. And in fact, we could just combine this clause up here to make it sort of one line if you want. Maybe I'll do that at the end when I'm cleaning up. We don't have to worry about that right away. That's common, right? We kind of code things and we find better ways of doing it and refactor. But anyway, let's carry on. At this point, we've covered all the invalid cases, and at this point, we know we're dealing with valid input, which is great. So for my algorithm here, what I want to do is to sort of maintain a counter and sort of, well, I should say state in general, because it's more than just a count. I want to know what the current integer I'm examining is, right? Let's say if I start with, well, what's the example string? They give us this example was 1123, right? So I'm going to look at the first character, which is a 1. And so to start, I'm seeking ones, right? I want to know how many consecutive. So I'm going to maintain that, just kind of this last, I'll call it last, in fact. I'll say char last. And I'm just going to initialize this with the very first character of the input string, right? We'll start with that. And then, of course, I want to keep a count. I want to know how many consecutive, well, I'll just say ones. I'll use concrete language here for now, but remember, the input could be anything. And it'll be 1 to start, right? Because we're starting with the first character in the string. Clearly, there's 1 to start. And then finally, I'm going to have a string field here. I should say a string variable. Fields are, when I use that language, that's descriptive more of a class member. And this is just a local variable, so forgive my slip up. I'll try to be precise in these descriptions. String output, this is the thing I'm going to return. And to start, it's just an empty string, and we'll sort of append data to it as we're processing. So now we're going to use a for loop, our old friend, but whereas we normally initialize I to 0, I'm going to initialize it to 1, right? Because we already have processed this first character in the string. So that's why I'm starting at 1. And then I can say I is less than data dot length, and then and we're incrementing I each time, right? Nothing crazy there, just your standard for loop for processing the remaining characters in the string. And so the idea here is then we're going to check the character that we've encountered at each stage through this loop. So you can imagine we would have taken the first 1 in this input to start with. Now that we're getting into the for loop, the I value is 1. We're going to grab this second one and examine it first. So it will be if data.I is not equal to last. So actually, you know what? Let's say if it's equal to last. Let's check the case where we have a match, right? What would we do when we match? Well, the character we're watching, this last, isn't going to change, right? Because it's a match. But we do want to increment the count. We want to say, hey, there's 2 of these ones now. There's no longer just 1. So I will say plus plus count. Good. And then finally, if this is not true, there's only 2 states, right? It either is a match or it's not a match. So otherwise, if that isn't the case, basically what we have to do is, it would mean, like imagine when I goes to 2, right? Then we would have encountered this 2. At this point, we have data now. We've ended processing ones, so we want to go ahead and attach that to our output and then sort of update our state. We want to clear the count back to 1, and we want to update the char, the last character encountered, to 2 now, right? Because we're going to check for 2s and so on. So to do that, let's say last equals the new character that we encountered, right? The count will be equal to 1. But before I destroy the state, let's go ahead and update that output. So I'll say output plus equals. I'm using this $sign in front of the double quotes. It's string interpolation. You've probably seen me do before. And notice that they want the count and then the integer. So I can very simply, when you use these curly braces inside the double quotes with the $sign, it's going to pull, instead of using the variable, the exact text of the variable name, it's actually going to give you the value of the variable. It's very convenient. So I'll say the count and then the last, which is the character. So by the time I had gotten to 2, this count would be 2 and last would be 1. So it should start us off with that output of 2, 1. Sorry, not the whole thing. I just want the 2, 1. Good. Then we sort of update our state, say, hey, now the last character is at 2, the count is 1, and it will proceed again through the for loop, checking. Of course, it will run into a 3 now, and it'll add to the output again, it'll say it had 1, 2, etc. And remember, if you're ever not sure, go ahead and type in here a console.write line, see what your variables are, see what's happening as you're executing if you're ever unsure. Now, maybe I'll show you what happens if I simply return the output. Maybe you can see the problem with doing this. Great if you can. But let's show you what happens. This is the right idea, but you'll see why it comes up a little bit short. And I did forget to add a semicolon. It's easy to do. Okay, string does not exist. We didn't bring anything in here. Let's bring in the using system namespace, and I used any as well, which is a length method. So let's just go ahead and take care of that. But if you didn't, you would get a warning about that as well. Let's try testing. Okay, so we're not quite right, but look at what happened. This was the expected output, and we were there, right? 2112, but we missed the 13. Hopefully you notice what's going on here is that we're not sort of, when we stop at the end, right, we've processed through all of the data. You can imagine there's one final bit of state, a last in a count that never got appended. You know, you could, because it breaks out of this for loop. So what we'll do here is to remember to make sure we add those final values. So I can say, just like I did before, count and last. And I think this will clean that up and make sure that 1-3 gets added in there. And sure enough, it did. Let's run the attempt to make sure. Okay, so we could submit this. I probably will. Like I said, if you wanted to do something like this, we could add that as a clause here. If or that, you know, if you just want to reduce your number of lines there. Let's make sure I didn't change anything. So yeah, I could still submit. Certainly a valid criticism here of my solution. You could say, well, Shug, you know, any's going to go through the data all the way. It's going to process all the characters. Well, potentially, right? It could break early once it fulfills its condition. But let's say it, you know, the last character in a long string was a letter. Then it would go through all of that, and then I'm going down here and going through the data again. And so, yeah, if you're worried about that, if you're dealing with the really long strings, you could check for a letter value in this for loop, right? And if you encounter one, then just return empty string right on the spot, you know. Certainly you could do that and that'd be a good exercise for you to do if you wanted to worry about efficiency. Just make sure that, you know, there are some nuances there because I started with the first character. So imagine you had an input that was only one letter, like this test case down here where it's just an alpha. There are some quirks there you just got to watch out for. It works. You just be careful when you're implementing that. But yeah, that could be a good exercise for you. And good on you if you notice that. Like, hey, you're kind of processing the input twice. You know, that's good that you're seeing that. And if you saw that, you know, I needed this last bit here, I was losing count and last on my final on my exit from the for loop. So those are all good signs if you're seeing those things right now. I think I'll go ahead and submit what I have here. Grab my kata points. You get yours too. Good work. Putting in the work. And as usual, look through these solutions. See if there's anything, hey, how'd they do that? What does that thing mean? You know, it'll give you good ideas for things to look up. So a lot of regular expressions. That seems to be a popular choice so far. But see what you can learn from other people. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you ever have questions. You know I'm here for you. As usual, I appreciate the likes and subs. I will see you all in another video.